Sorry.
Oh, meeting daughter, here we get some more people. Yeah. Was Patty gonna run? Patty. Oh, I see. Is she coming? So she'll take notes. Was she taking copies now? Or- Okay. Okay. Okay.
Need AJ to work today?
Yes.
It's pretty intimidating having you sitting right there.
Why?
I don't know, you're right in front of me, that's fine.
Get Dale over here, we'll be boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just here to listen.
Find out, maybe. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Does Maddie have to take notes or not?
Only if
Oh,
we-
good. Okay.
only if we talk.
Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. How we get started with the conversation, I mean, everybody, the whole county, Griggs County is pretty much got trouble every place, so. This was brought to my attention by Kevin Tweed and Henry. They were at our last meeting. I've taken quite a few phone calls since. And, you know, there's different ways, we haven't addressed where the problems are or what the problems are. If we do, you people would probably know where they're at. We've discussed a little about snag and clear. We did a project south of town here where it was just the landowners contributed $1 an acre and we cleaned up an outlet right on County Road 19. That seemed to have worked pretty well. So the map that just got passed out is the Red River Water Institute flew LiDAR quite a few years ago. I don't know how old the map really is. Here it's showing elevation differences of about 8 feet between Jesse and Lake Addy. This morning I met Mark Ressler out on the road and we shot the two lakes. Right now there's 33.5 inches between the two. It's not reflective to anything. Jesse is 33.5 inches higher than Lake Addy. And Jesse right now is flowing into Lake Addy. And Lake Addy does not have an outlet, I understand.
No, I don't think those two lakes are flowing together yet.
You don't think so? Okay. The culvert in the road where the flags?
But they're not connecting. That's
Okay.
at 33
Okay.
inches.
Well, it was pretty snowy out there.
Yeah, it was.
You couldn't see everything, but,
But it's just inches is all it is from flowing into
Okay.
Addy.
okay.
And that's partly because when they built the road, they cut a ditch, of course, you know, they built the road up. So that ditch is a little bit of an artificial feature compared to the lay of the land originally. But that's a matter of just a foot or so.
So what Kevin explained to me, usually in the spring of the year, culverts are froze or they open up, the water normally runs into Jesse from his place. Now the water's seeping out of Jesse Lake and heading past his place. So Jesse has kind of found an outlet, right, Kevin?
It appears that way.
It's really a closed basin up until it gets high enough, and it's reached that point.
Right.
I honestly think those lakes are at historic highs
Right.
from the time the first explorers came here.
I would agree with you. The water is at an all-time high no matter where we're looking, especially the 1st of November.
Yep.
It's just
Unprecedented.
roads cut out, people can't get to fields. I mean, it's just nuts. But, so I believe, John, is County Road 15 by the 1415 number? Have you looked at that?
Say it again?
Between sections 4 and 5 at the top of the map there is, would that be County Road 15? Maybe Troy, you would familiar? That's not 15?
There's a map right there. Over right there.
You gotta go farther east.
Yeah, it's not even on this. Well, it's right on the edge of 4.
Okay. So then it's between 3 and 4.
Right.
Right.
So
Oh, you
that's-
mean the macro road?
Yeah.
Yeah. it's
That's
between
one
3 and
over.
4
So-
on it. So, right.
Okay. So I never took a shot of that, but
It's,
it drops off pretty fast there.
The drainage drops into section 9, right at the midpoint on the far west side. So right between the north half and the south half is where it comes across the road there. And then it follows the north half of section 9 over to the Macville Road, and that's, of course, that's where that big new bridge, new culvert is.
No, it's on the Fieberger farm. It's further, it's not, it doesn't go through Odegaard's.
No, this, the one farther south of there,
Yep.
right. That's, it would be in section 8, no, excuse me, 5, 6, 7, 8.
10.
10,
Section
yeah.
10.
Jesse is shown there, and to the west of Jesse is the county road. Where the blue circles with the white X's, that's going north past Mark and Henry's.
Right, that's a different county road.
To
Yeah.
County Road 13.
That's
Yeah.
13, yeah.
So that's 13,
Mhm.
and then the next road would be the Brooks Road,
Yes,
and then the next road would be the Zimprick Road.
yeah,
Well,
right.
And then the next would be County Road
The one on the west side of
15.
9 is, it comes to a dead end at the north, you gotta turn,
Okay.
yeah. So the drainage runs through at that point, it runs through the Zimper half section in 9. And from there, from that line east, it's unimpeded.
Right.
I mean, it's just,
Right.
there's all,
Right.
there's no problem there at all.
So what my point was, we do have a good outlet, because it's just gone. If there's some problems back,
Yeah.
it's not like you gotta take this thing to the river. Right.
Well, once it, so, I went and looked at it last night on the west side on the west side of the road that goes between 8 and 9. The water, there's 3 culverts there, and the water was up over the inlets of the culverts. But on the east side, the discharge side, it was clear. So the water's getting to there,
Right.
it just can't take it away fast enough the way it looks. It looks like in the spring. When we have a lot of water.
And you know, you go up around Karnak and it's worse than any spring. I mean, this is it's absolutely insane. They've cut roads out, trying to let the water go, and
Can I add something?
you can add everything you want.
Well, here's our idea on what should happen in this meeting. I mean, we're the water board and we can facilitate, but the landowners will determine what happens. And there are different ways to make things happen, and we can help you with that. I was just at a meeting on Monday in Annetta for Nelson County. By the way, I'm Fred Lukens from Annetta on the Griggs County Water Board. And Nelson County is draining 21,000 acres of Pickerel Lake Creek that comes into Griggs from the north, just west of Annetta. And they put together, they've been working on it for 2 years, a program that's going to cost $100,000. And the landowners were assessed 50 cents an acre for 10 years, and it involves a bunch of culverts. I think it's $25,000 worth of culverts. It's not upgrading the culverts, I mean making them bigger, because they have to cross a railroad track, and you know, that's the size of that culvert is the limiting factor. It's just faulty culverts and things that aren't working. Anyway, so that's how they did it. And the snag and clear law that Tom referred to, the state of North Dakota has provided that as a way to do these things. That particular drainage area was 21,000 acres. Everybody in the drainage area is assessed a 50-cent fee per year. They're going to fund it over 10 years. It was a $100,000 project. We have no idea what this project would be. You know, you have to first come up with a plan and see what needs to be done. You got to work with Fish and Wildlife, because there are fish and wildlife easements. They had fish and wildlife easements there. And Fish and Wildlife were very cooperative. You know, knowing Kurt as we do, we expect Kurt will be exactly like that. I mean, and what Fish and Wildlife said is, I mean, where you have easements, you know, say on a quarter, you might have 15 acres of easements on a quarter, and so you got to protect that. But they went so far as to say that if we need to put a temporary ditch through the easement to get the water down, because I mean, north of Annetta, the water is over Highway 15, and so I mean the state is involved in everything, and so the Fish and Wildlife agreed to put temporary ditches through their easements to get the water down.
I would do the same. Right.
Thank you, Kurt. So, I mean, there are ways to get it done, but it's going to be driven by all of you on how you want to get it done and what you want done. The way the snag and clear law reads is that if 60% of the water board votes yes on a proposal and 60% of the county commission votes yes, then up to 50 cents an acre can be assessed. Now, what they did at this meeting is the Nelson County Commissioners turned to the crowd like this and said, how many of you are in favor of this? Show your hand. And he said, okay, it's a majority, we'll do it. But it's up to the county commissioners to determine what procedure they want. But the way the law reads is that 60% of the water board has to say yes, and 60% of the county commission says yes. That's one way of doing it. If you were to do the snag and clear and it didn't involve culverts, adding infrastructure, you'd be eligible for a match from the State Water Commission. of a 50% match up to 50 cents an acre. So if the project, I mean, this watershed is 40,000 acres. So theoretically, you could come up with $40,000 for 1 year to do the project. But that would not include culverts, that's just cleaning. So, and Tom mentioned how they did County Road 19. There's different ways you can do this. As I said, it's gonna be driven by you and what you want. So,
What exactly is snag and clear?
You know, I think
cleaning out natural waterways.
What's that century code, please?
Do we have that, Connie? That's what our attorney sent us.
No, I don't read the century code as soon as you get it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
I think the snag and clear was intended originally for rivers and,
I've read it before, I just
Okay,
wanted to read, I just
sure.
wondered. My recollection is it was intended for moving obstacles that were hung up under bridges, that were
Yeah,
plugging
and
inlets and
waterways.
culverts.
and I think it's been stretched to the natural waterways.
Yeah.
Barnes County has done it for cleaning out cattails. I mean, that cattails are the big problem. I mean, when cattails get into these water, Barnes County had a situation where they cleaned out the cattails and it lowered, I think it was Hobart Lake, it lowered the lake 54 inches just by cleaning out the cattails. Because, you know, cattails build up, they hold silt, and it keeps going up and up and up, and they become dams.
Well, I
Between
think
the
you have
cattail-
that here.
Between the cattail materials decaying, they're gonna just start, and then also, I think that silting has gone on, you know, after we started agriculture in this region,
Yeah.
100 and some years ago. Any of the land that's higher, runoff will be bringing dirt down into that. So I would think not only the cattails, but probably some more inches, you know, maybe 12, 15 more inches is probably just silt
Yeah.
that's plugging these waterways.
Depending on how much trouble there is, we haven't, don't know where it all is, but probably 6,000 to 10,000 to get a backhoe in to clean a mile, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Sam, which way does the water go on Lake Jesse? Does it go north or does it go south?
Goes
North.
Okay.
If you look on this map, you know, if you go over between section 11 and 12, that's where it wants to go. Well, that's where it's going now. And then it weaves its way around to,
It kind of hooks in with the outlet of Norway Lake. Is Norway still running? Wide
I'm
open?
Pretty sure it is. I haven't been down to the east end for, I don't know, probably 3 weeks now.
Well, that's where all the water's gotta be coming from if those culverts are running full. What's in there, at 36 coming out of Norway? Or what?
I think it's at least the 36, yeah. I drove by the north side of Norway Lake on Sunday afternoon, and that was the first time in probably a month that both ends of the culvert, the top of it anyway, was out of water.
Robert, you probably know exactly what's going on up there. I think it's coming out of the Osmundson Slough and up into the north of your place and then down into Norway Lake.
Yeah, it runs across the grade that went up to the fort. All comes down through the Pettinger, I don't know who owns that land now, but it comes down through the pit and we run into,
into Norway Lake, and
and then it moves out.
goes out. And the Zimpricks, everything is backed up there because it doesn't have enough clearance to get out of there.
The lake in section 10, is that Long Lake?
Yes.
And that's got quite a drainage area above it also.
And that runs into Jesse.
Absolutely. The culvert through the railroad grade there, our boys have played around up in that area up there years and years ago, and they went through it. I've gone through that highway one coming out of Long Lake by just bending over real low, you know, kind of at the hip mostly, but I pretty much walked through that one. You know, that's huge. So there's quite an inflow coming there.
The outlet from Jesse Lake goes right along the east side of section 11.
Yep.
Crosses the road there out at Tweeds, up just into the corner, southeast corner of section 2, and then joins in with the outlet out of Norway Lake. But it runs right into section 2 there, right in that little corner where that little white line is, and then from there it goes east up to Marks.
It goes east across the southwest quarter of section 1.
Yep.
You can kind of see that follow the drain, the white line.
Got a white line aiming right at that number 1
Right.
in section 1.
Yeah.
And if you look at the drop between the Brooks Road and the next one down, you've got about a 14-foot drop.
61.
So from there on down, it's downhill.
No issue anymore.
Thanks, Connie.
So in looking at this map, would there be roughly 3 miles of cleaning to go from 65 to the Brooks Road?
From Highway 65?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 3.5 miles.
It'd be closer to 5, wouldn't it? Going across section 11 north to south. The southeast quarter of 2, a portion of that,
Goes across 1.
and across 1, 6 and 5.
Yes, if you're counting 5 also. So is 5 where the problem is? Section 5?
It starts right at the end of Norway Lake and goes all the way over to basically to the end of 5.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5, 5 miles, yeah? If you gotta go all the way to...
Because there's crap all the way along through section 5 too, you know.
Section 6 has been cleaned a little bit, about 3 years ago. 5 was not.
Is this a name creek?
Yes.
What's the name?
No, I don't know.
Oh.
From years ago, they said there's a name.
Oh.
It's a blue line stream which gives the water board jurisdiction.
But is it a name creek?
You don't need a name creek, it's a blue line.
Right. But most of our creeks have names, the major ones, and this looks like a major one.
If a name is needed, we could probably come up with one.
No name Crick. No name.
I think,
Norway Lake Creek.
I think Connie labeled this what, Jesse Lake? Jesse Lake Outlet. You had a name, I said that works. So we still don't know where the problems are until it was surveyed and you figured it out. I mean, but potentially 5 miles of cleaning then. And then it's off and running.
Well, you know, you go up to Mark Zemprick's and look at his place. You can see the water is pooling there, it's not moving.
Right.
Well, if you could get that moved out, you know, and granted it'd have to be cleaned from the south too, but to me, you gotta start on the east end and work the other way.
Right. Start on 5.
Yeah. Because Mark down there, you know, he's drowning.
Right.
And at this time of the year, he shouldn't be sitting with water in his yard because it can't get out.
Right.
And I guess my situation, or I should say ours, because my wife is with me here today, is our township road coming into our place is our only access. And it's coming up on the road. The township has brought in fill to raise it. And I don't know if, Tom, you may have been there this morning.
Right.
Those tracks when we came up.
Right.
It isn't threatening overflow right now, but it's close. And I guess one of my concerns is come spring when the ice breaks up and you get a big strong wind, in a day it could be eroded unless it's raised high enough and has riprap on it. And I have no other way in or out. And Lake Jesse is the problem.
No, until the culverts are surveyed, it's really hard to know, you know, exactly where you're at.
I understand that.
Have you looked in your records? All those elevations should be in your records.
Tom?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the dates, but I believe it was in the 90s when Keith Munson took a swamp cat, what he called a swamp cat, a small caterpillar, that angled dozer, all the way from Mark Zemprick's, all the way down just about to the Macville Road. And he cleared off a channel in there back then. And the water board was involved, and there was a survey done and elevations, and it did help the Zempricks for a little bit then, but of course it was not near this much water.
So I wasn't aware that there's any, when the filing cabinets got moved over here, Connie's kind of went through them a little bit, but it's a mess.
I don't know, Jim, would you remember when that was done?
Not exactly, but yeah, you know, but that was, you know, it wasn't very wide, just what he could do with that blade, you know. And of course, it was really wet then too. But, you know, that's a lot of years ago, and it's all filled in again. It's
right.
You know, and yeah.
Well, it needs a cleaning.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, whether or not the channel gets narrow enough so that the spoil has to go somewhere. Because there aren't really any exemptions available to put the spoil in the wetland.
I would recommend that the cattails get sprayed too before. if there
That's,
was.
that's
like in-
all, that's all a maintenance issue. You know, to start this thing, you probably need to figure out what you wanna do as far as funding. You know, if it's a voluntary deal, I mean, we'll help you, whatever you wanna do. It's kind of,
So you're saying then that the water board itself has no funding to do anything, huh?
we've got funding for administrative. If we had funding to take care of your problem, then we'd have to take care of Bald Hill Creek, Pickerel Creek, Gunderson, Silver Creek, Harnick. Griggs County is just underwater. We don't have enough money, so it's up to the landowners to figure it out on their own. I mean, there is not enough money to go around. Everybody's got a problem, Jim. There isn't anybody that doesn't have a problem. And there isn't enough money to fix everybody's problem, because then you'd end up having to pay for their problem too. And they'd help pay for your, you know, it's, in the past, I know the water board collected more mills, and they picked and choose who they were helping. And you can't help everybody, so how do you pick who you're gonna help? It's people have to step up and start helping themselves on this. And maybe the townships have some money to put out in this. I don't know who's on Addy Township. Who, are you, Lonnie, on the board? It's a mess. You take the road going by Mark Ressler's all the way to Highway 200. That's a mess. That water needs to go, a lot of that needs to go south. You know, you name it, there's a problem. Go ahead, John.
Griggs County has been declared a disaster area. The state has signed on with that. That will now trigger a county-wide assessment of our infrastructure, in which FEMA will categorize our assessments as to the monies needed. So in some of these instances, that money has never, Connie, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's never been used for constructing new infrastructure. It's been used for rehabilitating and maintaining existing infrastructure, culverts, roads, things like that. So in the case of damage done by these waters, there will be, should be, funding through FEMA for that. Again, it's categorized on as an as needed basis and prioritized within the county. The problem with that, of course, it's a long drawn out process. 2009 FEMA funds were still being spent in 2013 and 14. But that does.
And it's reimbursement.
Yeah.
It has to be spent first.
Right. So that is also an option, but as far as constructing new infrastructure, it's not. It probably could be said that some of the infrastructure involving this drainage here was damaged because of high waters and material was put into it. So there probably is some funding available on a much longer term basis.
The problem with a lot of, and I have, you show me a culvert that isn't sitting full of water, and I'd like to take a picture of it.
Right.
There is hardly a culvert in Griggs County that isn't sitting in water. And it's maintenance issues that haven't been done. Therefore, your culverts rust out. You know, FEMA's been awfully good about replacing culverts that are rusted out. That is more of a landowner maintenance issue than it is their problem, but they've been good about replacing culverts. Anyway, in Washburn, they've been pretty good. But if there's culverts that are rusted out, it's an age-old problem. It's water has been sitting here for years. And I do have some pictures of Mark over at Mark's, and the water's right to his gates where he usually winters his cattle.
Right.
So it just isn't getting away. I mean,
And I'm sure you've seen his cattle are south of his place across the road because his area is all sitting in water where he normally would have his cattle. You know. But that's whatever.
right.
But do you think that part of the problem here is culverts?
I would say that the first part of this could be. I don't know what's going on at Kevin's place, in the culvert north of his place. Other than that, it probably is all cleaning. Have those culverts collapsed, Kevin? I mean, you don't know, they're underwater.
That one a mile north of me is completely rusted out, but there's still water flowing through it.
Okay.
We were up there, last Friday? And I was told about a month ago that Jesse Lake was flowing to the north, and I kind of questioned that, and Mark Zimprick and I went out that afternoon and drove across the east half of 11. And both him and I felt that at that point in time, we could see nothing moving from that slough east to the farm. We did find where a slough on his land was draining across my alfalfa field to the west and going into that slough there. And then there's a slough a half mile north of the farmstead that was running pretty good. And that's a natural drain headed that way. But we sat in the middle of that waterway that afternoon and for 2-3 minutes, and it was relatively calm, and we couldn't see anything moving from what you'd call Jesse Lake at that time. But last Friday, there's still some water going through this rusted out culvert, and it was iced over on the alfalfa field, so you couldn't really see water moving across there anymore. And that slough north of the farm had really slowed down from what it was earlier. So I'm thinking now it's gotten pushed to the point where, it is, Jesse Lake it would have to get awful high to flow, but it is seeping or trickling. I'd have to agree with that now, based on what I seen last Friday and what isn't moving of these smaller places.
I think the culverts on County Road 13 are okay, and I think Brooks's culvert's okay. I think Jimmy isn't. Frank's culverts down there, by Frank Zemprick's old place, good.
Got 3 of them in there.
Yeah, so
Yeah, they're
I
not
don't
that
think there's no
old.
culverts east of us that are the problem.
You probably either got a beaver dam somewhere in there, or else the rest of it is just
I
cattails
think-
plugging everything. They gotta be sprayed to, the channels are there. It's just that the water can't get through the cattail. If you look at by Mark's culverts there, it's flowing water, but it only goes out about 10 feet and then it's iced up. It just isn't flowing through the cattails. The cattails are plugging everything. And they gotta be sprayed. If you dig them out, they'll come back. You gotta kill them. It's the only way you can get rid of them.
The problem is we have winter. We can't do anything now, can we?
Gilbertson said he wouldn't take any equipment in there even if water's too high, and so you pretty much, hopefully it just keeps flowing through there's still a lot of water to run through there. I mean,
It'll probably freeze up before it flows much longer. There isn't enough flow really to keep it open.
Well, and there's still water coming from, through mine and through Mark and Henry's feeding that too yet.
Who has authority over Lake Jesse? Does the state? Or the wildlife?
Kurt, would you know that?
Well, we don't.
No, I'm just,
Yeah,
so there's a culvert leading out of Lake Jesse, and that was probably to feed water to Lake Jesse.
probably.
I mean,
It's a navigable waterway, so the federal government has control over it.
Or,
Yeah, the Corps of Engineers theoretically does. Whether they manage it or not is another matter, but they would have control of it.
when the original survey was done, both Lake Jesse and Lake Addie were surveyed out. In other words, it's not owned by the landowner, it's, I don't know, what's the right title for it?
I would call it waters of the state.
Okay. So
State
that's the
meaning the federal
status of
government,
the,
correct?
No, state North Dakota.
State Water Commission?
Oh, yeah.
State Water Commission probably sets the
Yeah,
level.
I'm not 100% sure
But-
they're navigable, John.
They're-
Like Red Willow Lake is, that's governed by, that's not the state, that's governed by the federal government. And I just assumed Jesse was the same way. The Corps of Engineers should manage it, but they don't manage those smaller unless there's a complaint or something.
I just always assumed those were waters of the state.
Oh,
So on Jesse Lake, up until this year, it hasn't been much to manage because water runs to the lake.
No, it's been several years, you know. I've lost several acres in 2 different pastures for, what, 15 years now?
and it just keeps getting worse. You know, this wet fall has magnified the problem.
Right. But if you took the road that goes by your place, Kevin, that culvert, and cleaned the problems until you got through 5, you probably would, it'd make a big difference.
Yeah.
Depending on
But,
if the, trying to keep the dirt out of the wetlands.
You know, the southeast quarter of 11 and the southwest quarter, that low area there in Henry's pasture, the southwest quarter of 12, 30 years ago plus, they naturally drained into Jesse Lake in the spring. I'm not sure exactly where the cutoff is, but the northeast quarter of 11, where that slough is a half mile north of where I live, that naturally flows to the north and east from there. I have no idea how much dirt, if you want to call it that, would have to be moved in order to start getting things to flow to the north. Some people call it a natural waterway. I don't necessarily agree with that.
It's natural now.
Yeah,
Does that all have easement on it?
yeah.
Well, not all of it.
Well, there's, you know, portions of it.
Kurt and I looked at it at our last meeting, and you can skirt around quite a bit of it.
Yep.
I think there was one in 11
Yep.
that was a problem, and we just,
Well-
no, it was in 2.
Yeah, coming up, yeah.
It was
so
in 2.
There's allowable drainage in 11, as far as the easement.
Yeah.
Well, I got a question then for Kurt. Can the county take water off of Jesse Lake if they don't have control of that water? I mean, could we build a drain and drain Jesse Lake? Or would that trigger a whole bunch of agencies coming to want to have their fingers in the control of that?
I feel like, Lauren, I don't know if you remember, back with Norway Lake, if the state got involved.
Yeah, the state set the outlet on Norway Lake,
Yeah.
and that's where the culvert is. so.
I just assumed Norway Lake would be similar to Jesse, but I don't know, so. State Water Commission, right?
Yep,
That's it.
with Corps
Yeah.
involvement.
Yeah, because the height of it's governed by the culvert coming in underneath the railroad tracks.
And that's really coming, designed to come in, or, right?
Well,
But anyway,
I mean,
that's-
after flying over it for years, in the spring and in the summer and the fall, it acts both ways.
Sure.
Kevin's correct, and sometimes in the springs, it would run in it would run into Jesse Lake. I mean, we can all remember when Jesse Lake was dry, we raced pickups out there. Well, then any moisture did run into it. Now, as it gets so high, it'll reverse the course, and you know, Norway Lake the same way, that water, it runs in until it doesn't, and then it runs back. It all ends up the same place, going east there, right into section 9, and then across underneath the Macville Road.
Is the culvert on south end of Long Lake the same elevation as the culvert on the,
I don't know.
over by Kevin's pasture?
I don't know, the culvert the culvert underneath the railroad tracks there is collapsed.
Which one now?
The one where, right underneath the railroad tracks on the north side of, on the south end of Long Lake,
Okay,
that's collapsed.
that's collapsed. How about the one east, over right south of Kevin's pasture there?
Underneath the tracks there?
Yeah,
I don't know, but I do know the one, that west culvert on the north side is collapsed because there's no flow coming through there, that's why there's no fish coming in anymore. And it collapsed about, what, 3 years ago? You could see where the whole bank slid down and closed it off. And so in the spring, you would get higher levels in Long Lake now dammed up against the railroad tracks than you had in Jesse Lake.
Not anymore.
No, it's seeping through there now.
No, it runs pretty good.
Yeah.
It might be restricting it so it backs up in Long Lake
No, not
some,
really.
but it's coming through.
Yeah.
As far as, you use the word collapsed, it might be partial, but it's still flowing.
Maybe it is now again, but for
Well.
a couple of years it wasn't. It collapsed. You could see where the whole bank slid down.
Well, there's been erosion and collapsing of the soil, but the culverts are still operative, are still functional.
I believe all those culverts are cast or the thick.
See, when they built 65, they just laid that right in the bottom of the draw. I mean, that was right on the ground, when the culvert crossed 65, that was laid right on top of the ground, and then they built up the grade over it. I mean, that's how that was done. I know, because I was there.
And that culvert must be at least 30 inches in diameter, maybe 36, I'm just going by memory.
They used
Having-
36.
Having gone through it, you know, there was a little bit of trickle of water in the bottom of it at that time, but
So how much of this is surveyed, Lauren?
Pretty much from 4 to Norway Lake.
that's all on the record someplace?
Well, not maybe the whole thing, but I know Chuck, they've been out there especially through, I think we went all the way through 6. But then we did some work in there. But I know, I talked to Bob and he thought there was a restriction now on 5, a small one. Because they're not getting much flow on the road north of Bob's. I mean, if you look at that, that's bare, I don't even know if that's running. I mean, I know it has to be because there's a little bit of flow through Marks, that county goes,
No, you can't.
but not much. That whole thing is it's held up down below. And if you could get the water flowing down below, that would relieve a lot of pressure off of Marks, what's sitting on there. But the holdup really is in 6 and 5, I would say, but 6 should flow if 5 is.
I think the problem is 5, because 6 has been cleaned, but the cattails come back.
And if I remember right, when that bridge went out north of Brooks's there was a bridge there, and that collapsed. And my understanding is that they didn't put the culvert there low enough, the new culvert. So that culvert probably needs, I'm just, without going into it.
It's been reset again.
Did they reset it?
Yes.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
We spent quite a bit there.
There about 10 days ago. The water flew through there.
Henry, can you tell us at Marks, is the water level going down or up right now?
It's dropping slowly.
Dropping slowly. So there is a little flow
Yes.
heading east.
You can see that in the culvert there.
So it's just definitely the cattail problem that's slowing everything up.
Mostly in 6 where the problem is getting the water, get over to that culvert. Once you get into 5, it drops it up, and it's not backing up there. The culverts are,
Empty, pretty
well,
low.
they're right and a half full. And we got guys complaining there's too much water coming down because you can't get across the creek. I mean, so it's running good, but it's not coming fast enough to get over to help these guys out.
So what's the options to helping Mark? There's none right now. You have to wait till spring. Spray the cattails.
Can you, I asked you that the other day, the last time they sprayed the cattails, we were not allowed to spray all the cattails, we had to leave strips.
Yeah, that's news to me. We can spray all the cattails we want.
That's correct, because I had the wildlife spray, or whoever does that spraying, on the, west quarter. And they just went down with strips, and it's just all cattails again now.
Yeah, I think that's a USDA program. I know it is. It was a Blackbird program.
Yeah,
That's
They would-
correct.
Yeah, they would spray the strips, you know, down.
You had to leave 20%.
Yeah, to break, well, they're trying to break up the blackbird roosts.
Yeah,
all
that's,
they're
that's what that program was about. It was for when we had sunflowers here and the blackbirds were eating everything up and they were roosted in the sloughs.
Yeah.
And you could use the aqua version of Roundup. And it didn't have the surfactant in there, but you had to photograph it beforehand, had to photograph it afterwards, and then you had to leave 20% of the vegetation had to stay in strips, not in one chunk. So you'd spray one pass, two pass, leave one. So I don't know if that would work in this, but that was a program that was funded through the USDA.
Yeah. So, yeah, as far as the easements go, you can spray all the cattails.
If you could spray all the cattails, you could use an airplane. The helicopters are so expensive. I had asked Brian about it earlier, and he said, I can't fly, but I can spray the whole works. And we were talking more down by Karnick there on the south side of the Mankey Road there. That's just crazier than heck. So anyway, we all, if we could find this, is the survey called the Blue Line Survey then? It must have a name. Norway Lake Survey? I mean, how would we find a survey if it isn't a named creek or? I guess we didn't know there was one. We can look for one, but I don't know what it would have been called.
Let me read through the process if you were to create a snag and clear district, just so you know the timing and things that are involved. This was prepared by our attorney, Sean Fredericks. So number one, creation of a snag and clear district does not require a landowner vote. Number two, the process requiring a public hearing preceded by a public notice published in the official county newspaper. Number three, the public hearing must be attended by a quorum of the Water Resource District and a quorum of the county commission. Number four, the snag and clear project cost must be less than $100,000 and must assess less than $100,000 total. The assessments will cover the costs of creating the district and of course the cost of the project itself. So the project will be less than $100,000 and less the cost of creating the district. Assessments cannot be more than 50 cents per acre for ag properties and cannot be more than 50 cents per $500 of taxable value on non-ag properties. This is a one-time assessment district with 1 year of assessments levied for a one-time project. If the board wants to conduct an additional snag and clear in the same area in the future, you go through the process again. So here's the process. The water board would direct their engineers to conduct a watershed analysis of the area that will benefit from that project. The engineers will develop a proposed assessment list excuse me, based on the watershed benefit analysis. Number three, once the list is ready, the board would approach the county commission with the engineers and the attorney to explain the legal process and explain the proposed assessment based on the draft assessment list prepared by the engineers. Once the county commission is comfortable with the concept, the board can approve the preliminary assessment list and approve a resolution to set a hearing. The attorney will prepare a notice for hearing and will arrange for publication. The attorney will mail hard copies to the board, the county commission, the state's attorney, etc. Number 6, recognize state law does not require mailings to landowners within the proposed assessment district. If the board decides to do that, we can. Just recognize there is a cost associated with a mailing, and we're limited to $100,000 of assessment collection. 10 days after the publication, we conduct a public hearing at the courthouse. At the hearing, we explain the project, explain the legal process. The engineers can explain the benefit analysis and the proposed assessment list. We probably have a large map with percentage benefits and a depiction of the project area. Number 7, following the hearing or at the board next meeting, the board can discuss any comments made. The board can modify the list or approve the list as is via resolution. Lastly, the attorney would send a draft resolution to the counties for the county's consideration and hopeful approval. Once the county approves the resolution, this assessment district is created. By law, at least 4 of the 5 county commissioners must approve the resolution. So that's the process to set up an assessment district.
And the size of the assessment district is determined by the water board?
It's the map of, we had that map in here at our last meeting. It's 40,000 acres. It's the entire.
That's what you determined it to be, but the size is determined by the water board. It can be anywhere from 1,000 acres to 40,000 acres. It's not the drainage like it is in a voted on drain. It's the particular snag and clear, the problem you're trying to fix, is the way I read this, and I've read it a number of times. So you're right, if you include the whole 40,000 acres in there, that can be the assessment district, but it could also be a smaller area, just germane to what we're trying to do here.
I think on County Road 19, we went after the whole watershed, but it was a voluntary. If you're on the outskirts and some people didn't pay, you know.
Right. I mean, if you're going to try to include everybody in the 40,000 acres
Right.
and get their go-ahead for this to get a majority, that's probably not doable.
Right.
So it has to be sized to a point where it's affecting, where the people voting on it are the ones affected. And then it can probably go forward and get done. But otherwise, you're not going to get,
Right.
you know, if you go too big and the people will say, well, that doesn't even affect me. Why should I be involved in that?
And that's why we did kind of a voluntary deal.
Well, Nelson County just did this, and it was a 21,000. I mean, just in Nelson County, and they did everybody, and the majority of the people were in favor of it, and you know, they're assessing the entire watershed. That's up to, you know, that process. We can determine what that process is, but Barnes County has done it. They've done everybody. This is the 3rd or 4th time Nelson County has done it, where they've assessed the whole watershed. So that can be however we want it to be.
But don't you think it has to have majority approval of the people that are going to be taxed?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's up to the county commission. Like I said, in Nelson County, they had a hearing, and the commissioners turned to the people at the hearing and said, how many are you in favor of it? Took a show of hands, and they said, okay, that's a majority, we'll do it.
Well, I mean, that, of course, that's not the way to do it. I mean, you would send out ballots and they would vote it by the number of acres they have involved in the project, just like you would an assessed drain.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then that's fine. I think that's I think that's the way to do it, to get the more involvement, the better.
I think there's 123 landowners in on this whole watershed, and there's probably, what, 35 people here, so.
But the assessed drains, they vote acreage, not.
I know. No, what I'm saying is we could take a show of hands here and everybody would raise their hand. There's 100 people that aren't here.
I don't think that qualifies as
No,
democracy.
no, I don't.
But the reason this law was created, my understanding, is traditionally, people at the top don't want to pay. People at the bottom who have the problem want the problem solved, and they're willing to pay. And this is a way of creating some fairness in the project, because it's everybody's water. It's not just the people at the bottom. It's not just their water. It's everybody's water. I mean,
I disagree with that, with the reason it was created. The reason it was created, and if you read the legislative notes on it, was to remove debris that had accumulated around structures, man-made structures. That was the reason it was created. What you're talking about is an assessed drain, which I think should be done here. I think there should be an assessed drain. I think it should be voted on. I think it should be a project that is then financed over a long period of time. I think it would have maintenance that way, similar to the Karnak drain, and it would solve the problem long term. A one-year deal at 50 cents an acre is not going to solve this long-term problem. So we have to look at this rather than a panic situation. We have to look at it as an infrastructure project. And that's going to take a lot of money, it's going to take a lot of dedication, but that's the only way that this is going to be a benefit 50 years from now. And it has to include everybody that's going to be benefited from it. So it's not going to be a there and it's done, because that's not the way you fix these things. So the dedication to it is, it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, and I think it's a worthwhile process, but it is a process.
well, my understanding of the snag and clear, when you set up a legal drain, there's a bunch of engineering costs, generally $100,000 in engineering costs. This avoids all of that. See, you have much less overhead because you're just cleaning. And as I read, you can go back and clean. I mean, like Tom said, the problem with these things is there is no one-time solution. You have to continually clean. You have to continually spray the cattails. That can be done.
But that's where the maintenance of 25 cents an acre comes in. I mean, the maintenance doesn't have to be much on a drain like this. You just need enough to keep the cattails sprayed.
Right.
Once it's cleaned, it'll, the initial,
But that's
initial
why it's an
fix.
assessed drain. I don't see the interpretation that you read from your lawyer there. I'm not a lawyer by any means, but I've read that thing so many times. It's a one-time fix, and it's for clearing debris.
But you can go back and do it over and over again. So it's not a one-time fix, it's a one-time assessment, and then you can go through the process again and again.
So when they did a 10-year, that isn't really, what they did here isn't really snag and clear.
It's different.
Right. It's kind of a privately funded County Road 19 project.
Yeah.
It's just over a 10-year period.
So who,
They don't care what the rules are in Nelson County, but Tom.
so if we ever find out who actually controls Jesse Lake, shouldn't they be liable because if Jesse Lake
No.
raises more, it's gonna take a bunch of roads out
Right.
south.
Right. I
So
don't,
shouldn't the people who control Jesse Lake be helping out?
you won't find that help. But I'd say maybe the State Water Commission sets that level, I'm guessing,
I would guess.
more so than the Corps. I mean, I think the State Water Commission, because they do a lot of the major,
The State Water Commission, Henry, will if you create this snag and clear district, the State Water Commission will contribute up to 50 cents per acre. So they will help. But again, it's driven by all of you.
So the first step probably would be to investigate if the water board has any information from when that was surveyed back in the 90s or early 2000s, somewhere in there, and determine where those elevations are.
Right. So Connie is gonna look for something with no name.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to help.
The problem is, right now, we probably don't have enough information to make a decision on which way to go.
Henry, when you used to hay that bottom, wasn't there a channel at the bottom there the whole way?
Yes.
So that'd be the natural outlet. And if it was taken down to that old channel where you and Bob used to hay that, that would just about clear out all the water at bottom marks, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And if you cleared it out of marks, most of this stuff would disappear.
The biggest thing is to keep the spoil out of the wetland. If the channel is 20 feet wide and you're out of the cattails, you don't have a problem, but that isn't really the case.
You aren't gonna, right now, you really aren't gonna be able to throw it far enough.
Does that spoils have to be, Kurt, have to be removed right away, or could it be left there for 5 years if you can't get at it?
Well, I don't know, I can't speak for the Army Corps of Engineers, but, I mean, common sense, I would think would prevail, but I can't say.
I mean, that takes a lot of money to move it out and then grab it again and move it out again.
I don't think they care about your money. I mean, I don't mean that.
Yeah, I know that.
You gotta, if you wanna get to that point, I think you gotta get the cattails out of there so the water can flow, so you can find out where the channel is and then clean the channel after the water's gone. Now, that's, maybe I'm putting the horse before the cart, but that seems to be the way it's gotta be done.
It's gonna take years before we get rid of cattails.
Well, you aren't gonna do it this fall. I think, Kurt, does the Corps still have that boat with the mower on it?
I don't,
I mean,
Yeah, I
or
know
you
that.
guys?
no, we don't have one. I don't know if the Corps has one or not. Good
I
question.
thought we were looking at
Maybe.
one in Louisiana.
Oh. Well, they make them. I've seen them down south,
Whatever.
yeah.
I thought you got,
We have a boat.
mower on
Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm gonna say about 7 years ago, and in time frame, location-wise, if you go to the corner north of town here, it's about 7 miles, you get the intersection of 65, 45, and a 90-degree corner on 45, there's the stop signs there and so forth. Okay, if you come south a mile and a half, there's a drainage there that was cleaned out, like I say, maybe that many years ago, 6 or 7, maybe. give or take.
That's the Cooper
That
Tire
went
Road.
west and cleared out to control the level of Lake 5.
Yep.
All right, as I recall, that drainage was just with a track hole, I suppose. They just dug that out and dumped it right alongside the ditch.
Still there.
And I think it's still there.
It is.
That drains under Highway 45, just west of the.
They weren't supposed to do it then, and you can't do it now.
Okay, I thought maybe that was a precedent.
That shouldn't have been done, shouldn't have been left.
Okay.
So it's, if you wanted to clean that drain now before you started, you'd have to deal with the spoil that they left there 10 years ago or whenever. That's the problem. You know, you gotta
So-
clean up someone else's mess before you can start.
Oh, boy. Wow. That doesn't seem right.
It's easy to dig a ditch. The cleanup is half the ditch. You know, people just walk away from that mess and then it grows into cattails and whatever, and then you gotta deal with that before you can clean it again. It's all over. I mean, it's just the way, a ditch isn't done until they finish it. I mean,
And that one isn't done.
And maintain it.
yeah, it's hard, you can't maintain it now. You can't even get in there with a backhoe hardly to maintain it.
That's why it needs to be
Because
a
it's
permanently assessed drain, so it can have a dedicated maintenance levy to it and be done religiously.
Wow.
But a drain like this could be sprayed with an airplane, right? It's pretty,
But it doesn't remove the debris, so you
No.
just kill it and then it all falls down there, it actually aggravates the problem.
right. But once it's cleaned out, it's gotta be sprayed and kept clean.
Yeah, somehow, somehow, but you gotta get it clean.
Would you explain that snag and clear project? I mean, what is that? I mean, it's just to clean the channel out or what?
Yep, it's for removing debris. I think it was around rivers is what it was probably designed for. And then there are water boards that have taken it a step further and used it in natural waterways.
Yeah.
That's what they do up around Grafton area, because we just had that problem with Grafton on the snag. It's collection of debris around bridges.
Yep, that's,
Mostly trees.
I read the legislative intent of the bill, and that's what it was originally designed for.
Yeah.
Not saying it isn't used for other things now, but
So Connie, how much work is it to put acres to the map of people? Is that a,
The watershed one? I'd be doing some. We'd do a lot.
Where did you?
I think that's something we need.
If we were to get one of John's, we would need some money. Landowners would have to come up with
Right.
money.
right.
So Tom, here's the snag and clear that starts out the whole snag and clear century code. A water resource board may undertake the snagging and clearing and maintaining of natural water courses and the disbursement of bridges and low water crossings. So that's what the original intent of it was.
Any idea what year that was drafted?
No, I don't.
There's a year on
But
there.
so, I mean, of low water crossings, theoretically, you could finagle that into a 5-mile low water crossing. But again, it's just a one-time fix and it doesn't do anything.
2 years ago, the legislator took the money out of snag and clear, so there was no money available for local projects like this. This last legislative session, they put money back into it. They talk in terms of buckets. There's $48 million in that bucket. And it's not just for snag and clear, but that's where the snag and clear comes from. So there is money available. But you gotta go through the process, and like I said, the State Water Commission would set the level coming out of Lake Jesse. And if we were going to proceed with this, I mean, the first thing that has to be done is, as Tom said, is you have to determine what the problem is and what the possible cost would be. We'd have to get our engineers involved. The county commission made it clear to us that we don't have money to just go out and do this stuff. So the landowners would have to come up with the money for the engineers to do a study and to determine what what should we do? What's the project? What's the total cost? That's where it would start.
What kind of dollars are you talking for the engineers?
You know, if the survey has been done and we can find it, but I suppose this is a couple $1,000 survey. And the assessment district is gonna take some, I don't know how much time they spent on County Road 19. That was 9,200 acres. I think that was $800 or something, I don't remember, but you know,
Project, that was kind of a modification,
you know, and it wouldn't, it matters, but if a guy collected $5,000-6,000, it would always stay with this project. It would be like a savings account set aside, and we'd use the money out of that to proceed to see where we're gonna go. It's just, we've got 10, 12 different places that we don't have enough money to fund all these things. Don't have any. So, with that being said,
5,000.
5,000. Would you agree with that, Connie, with what we've kind of went through? A couple thousand for the survey, maybe a couple thousand for the acreage.
Because the first thing we'd have to find out is, well, there's a lot of things, but if the culverts are inadequate, rusted out problems, I mean, that's gotta be fixed. If we're putting in infrastructure like that, then the state match is out. We need to know that.
Is the railroad track crossing adequate?
You know, those are probably 36s. They put 36s just about everywhere.
So who owns the railroad right there? Did somebody buy it?
Abandoned 25, 30 years ago.
But did somebody
but
buy it?
It's for sale.
Oh, yeah, it's for sale, but I don't think very many people bought railroad right away because they're holding the price up high.
Tom bought a mile north of town. You can't tell there was a railroad track there.
Been quite a few bridges that I have to research and see.
Two railroad culverts involved at Lake Jesse, one coming from Long Lake and the other one kind of going over by Kevin Please here. Those are deep in terms of the grade that's built over the top of those culverts.
Right.
So, one way or another, we would need landowners to voluntarily put in $5,000 to get the engineering started.
And they would get credit back when we do something for their, could be part of the legal drain process or part of the money.
The Corps of Engineers gonna run the project then?
No.
No?
Would it be you, the water board?
We'd facilitate. The Corps would get involved to get a section 404 probably, you know.
Would we, Kurt, would we need a 404 on this?
I mean, I guess you probably should apply and then they'll determine if it's jurisdictional, I think.
Yeah.
The question who would run it, that's kind of multifaceted. You could also actually form a drain board. You could make this a legal drain and you could vote on the board members and then it would be totally within the control of the members of that board. That's the way a lot of legal drains are done. And then the water board would help facilitate the interaction with the different agencies. But the water board wouldn't have control over the drain, the legal board drain would. Drain board would.
But, you know, the process, you have to work with Fish and Wildlife, NRCS would likely be involved, the Corps of Engineers. I mean, you gotta get everybody on board, and then you start the work.
This is for which version of it?
If it was to become a legal drain.
Yeah, so the legal drain version of it would be the money put up to get the engineering study done and develop a cost. Then that study would be used to facilitate a public vote on the project. The landowners vote their acreage. If you have 1,000 acres in it, you get 1,000 votes. If you have 2 acres, you get 2 votes. That would determine then the length of time, 20 years, for the assessment, the tax assessment, and the cost of the project. If that vote passed by a majority, then it goes forward and the project would then move forward to its completion, just like the Karnak drain is going right now, or whatever we're calling it.
But
In
there
that
would be a
scenario,
perpetual
in that scenario, it's perpetual.
maintenance levy, but
Yep.
not the construction levy.
Yep. And then it would be under the control of the board. The board would change hands as it matured. It would be here, it would be there until it was dissolved by the same kind of vote. That's an expensive project. I mean, you're talking probably, who knows? What was the Karnak drain, 1.5 million over 20 years, just for the construction of it? But it is permanent, or can be permanent, and it will, if it's engineered correctly, it will solve the problems now and in the coming years. It's money well spent that way, I believe.
The advantage on this project, like the Thompson Bridge outlet, we had to create a new channel. The water normally ran here. We're saying that doesn't work, so we had to create a new channel, and there was a lot of engineering involved. In this project, we wouldn't have that. We know where the water's supposed to run. Just need to get it running.
When you're talking about a survey, are you talking about having it surveyed from the railroad grade
Right.
in Jesse Lake
Culverts.
north and all the way across?
How far is that culvert underwater, Kevin, where it comes out of Jesse? I haven't.
I wouldn't
can't-
dare say. I haven't
can't-
seen it for years.
Me either.
Well, that's hard to survey.
I mean, I know you can see where it is. When it starts freezing, you can see where it is, but I don't know how far down it is.
That's hard to survey.
So the next biggest question is who wants this, we need to create some kind of board or do something to get the ball rolling on this. Instead of just, you need to form some kind of committee or do something, or somebody to head it up to
What we
get the
need,
state water commission contacted and.
well, we'd do that, but what we need is some seed money to get it going. That's what we would need.
I think they call
Money
it
for
facilitators, don't they? Of the project.
And you said 5,000, right, that you guys are kinda
I'm just guessing.
spinning the
yeah.
wind kind of money that, something there is what you need.
I was just wondering if, just in the interest of time here, if we are to the point where, can people indicate if they would be interested in participating and putting some money in by a show of hands, or is that too soon? for
No, that's
anybody
fine,
else?
that's fine. So a show of hands here of, what do you guys think of doing a snag and clear versus a legal drain? I mean, so,
I have a question about that. If we were to have engineers assess drainage, could we use the same study for a long-term solution and a snag and clear? Would that be something we could share the information?
absolutely.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be of much use because
If
the engineering study has to be done because it has to encompass what the whole project is gonna be.
Right,
Where the $5,000 you'd use here, you just shoot elevations.
right.
Yeah. Because the engineering study for a snag and clear has to encompass what the cost of the project is gonna be. In order to arrive at that, to give the people a chance to vote and see if they wanna pay for that or not.
I guess I was just wondering, I know the the end game would be different in both, but if we could share that engineer's studies for the bulk of it, just looking at the channel and drainage.
I doubt it. I mean, possibly, but I doubt it.
One of the differences on if you created a legal drain is the assessments on a legal drain on a snag and clear, it's just 50 cents an acre, and on a legal drain, the engineers will determine if you're at the top of the watershed, you don't pay as much, and then there's a different assessment per acre depending on where you are in the watershed. And then that also affects your voting. If you're paying 100%, your vote costs more than the guy who's paying 5%. Because we were involved in a project, Nelson County, Steele County, and there were 6 landowners that were going to determine whether if those 6 landowners didn't vote yes, it wouldn't pass because of where they were in the drain. So you're voting in a legal drain. Your voting is seated by where you are in the drain.
The commitment you have to the drain, you vote your acres, and you vote your acres and the amount of water is how they do that.
So one other question that I have is, mostly what we've been talking about is, draining Jesse Lake down to get rid of the water. But a lot of the water that is also backing up from there south is in Addy Lake and taking out roads. And all that is captive right now because it won't go north, obviously because of the road.
Jesse is 33.5 inches higher than Addy.
Yeah. But I'm saying we're
You'd have to pump it if you were going to try to get rid of some of Addy.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that, obviously that's a big concern for all other people southward of that, where it's backing up like Marks and,
Right.
the roads are going because the water's just backing up. That's also a concern that I guess hasn't been addressed.
Depending on how much water you could take off Jesse, Jesse is probably pushing Addy up underground.
Yeah.
Addy's a dead end basin.
Right. You'd have to pump it over the road to get that down. Providing you could get rid of some water off of Jesse.
So are you figuring that maybe 3, 4, 5 years that Jesse and Addy will be level if they're...
We could make
Run
them.
this push.
We could make them level right now.
I hope not.
Take Addy up 2 and Jesse down 1. They'd be one lake.
You don't think that Jesse is seeping underneath?
Well, I believe it is.
To Addy.
You guys know predicting Mother Nature is not a good profession.
Well, again, I remember in 1978 or 79 racing pickups out on Jesse Lake in the summertime. It was one big alkali.
Yeah.
When we moved there, it was blowing.
It was dry as could be.
Yeah, Danny Fieberger and Clevis, and there was quite a crew out there.
Yeah.
So, show of hands, who would be interested in putting in some seed money to start this project? Okay.
Should we have those people sign up? We create something and try and get the process started.
Well, and I know some people that couldn't make the meeting today that told me that they would be interested in helping out as well. Like one, for instance, was Gary Clubrood, which has got the land just north of Marks and Burks. He said he'd be willing to to help with it too. So maybe if you could do another letter and send something out, like, you know.
My idea was the people that raise their hand, you call the people that don't, that you know would help. Because a letter from us isn't the same as you calling your buddy.
Sure.
You're right.
So, I mean, we take this group and we try and expand it.
So how much is seed money?
Well, I mean, $500 a person, and if you got, I don't care if there's 20 people, the money isn't going anywhere other than this project. It'll sit in an account for Jesse Lake Outlet, or what, you had a good name for it the other day, Connie, I don't remember what it was, but.
It's fine. It's in the minutes.
So that would get the ball rolling. I don't like to hear that there's a culvert so deep you can't get to it, though. That's,
The first one.
yeah.
Multiple.
And maybe that doesn't matter. It's hard to get to an elevation you can't see or find. I mean, if
Well,
it's,
we
if it's,
know, we know the elevation of that culvert is, if it was drained down to that culvert, there wouldn't be a problem with Jesse Lake.
right.
So it doesn't really matter. It's right in the south side of 65 there, right where it comes across. And then, you know, the railroad,
Yep.
it's probably 50 foot tall there, the bank, and it's way down at the bottom. I mean, I can remember seeing it years ago, but I haven't seen it in years.
Does the culvert through 65, is that full of water?
That's
Oh, that's covered too. Yep. There's 2 culverts in 65 and 2 culverts in railroad grades right adjacent to it. They're all underwater.
The one in 65, the east one, though, that hasn't been that many years where I see that.
What?
The east culvert on, coming out of Jesse, that hasn't been so many years where I could see that one underneath 65, going into your slough there.
It's been quite a few.
Yeah, you can see the top of it, I remember a few times. But the one in the railroad tracks, if Kevin doesn't remember it, I certainly don't.
There was ice on that here a couple days ago, and now the ice is cut in half, so water must be flowing through it.
Yeah, I saw when there was ice on it, you could see right where the culvert was. 2 days ago, I saw it.
Because of the flow.
I should have took a picture of it.
It's flowing through there. And that's,
But we were digging around east of Karnak, Lynn and I, for a long time. Those culverts are underwater, and it was nice out, and you couldn't find them. We never did find them.
So if you agree, Tom, I would suggest we have the people who said, yes, we want to get this going, come up here, sign up with Connie. Every one of you call 2 other people that want to do it. If the number is 20 people, then it's $250 each. 10 people, it's 500. Make sense?
And once we have all the names, I could send out a letter then to remind people to send their money.
Yeah, that would be the way to do it. Once we have, these 20 people have agreed, Connie sends out a letter and collects the money, and then we get the engineers involved, and it won't be done by February.
Will you make the check out to the Griggs County Water District? Yeah, and we can borrow.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Does anybody have anything else?
So, yeah, never mind.
Thank you, Kurt, for coming and your support. Much appreciated.
Meeting adjourned.
So are you looking for the donation today?
Just, I whenever.
You put my name.
Okay.